In our final video lecture for this chapter, we're going to talk about other things that we might see flying through the sky: asteroids, meteors, and comets. And we'll talk about the distinction between these. Asteroids are sometimes called minor planets, or they're rocky, airless, meaning they have no atmosphere. Remnants of the early formation of our solar system, 4.5 to 4.6 billion years ago. You can imagine the asteroids as being just debris or rubble, that is, and most of it is located between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter, as shown to the right. And we call this the asteroid belt. There are maybe 1 million asteroids that have been identified, and probably many more that are smaller that haven't been identified. The largest asteroids are Ceres, which is sometimes also considered a dwarf planet, and Vesta. Now, in addition to the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, there's also what is called the Kuiper belt, which are asteroids that we find beyond Neptune. So we have the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter and the Kuiper belt beyond Neptune. Oh, before leaving this, notice that Jupiter, the largest planet, as it goes around its orbit, you can see that there are some asteroids in its path, in its lane, going around the sun, called Greeks and the Trojans. And you can imagine that Jupiter, being so large, will maybe at some point gobble them up and either pull them towards it and bring them into its gravity field. Meteoroids. Now, the three words, meteoroids, meteors, and meteorites. What's the difference? Well, a meteoroid is a small, rocky, metallic body in our solar system, space debris. Usually it's smaller than an asteroid. It might be the size of a pebble or a boulder. Think like a microwave oven kind of size. Meteors, what we sometimes call shooting stars, when they enter the atmosphere of planet Earth, where the atmosphere tends to, due to friction, sort of burns up the meteoroids. If the meteoroid can survive being burned up as it enters the atmosphere and actually strikes the ground, we call it a meteorite. So that's the basis for having three terms for sort of a process. A meteoroid is the small rocky body that is floating out in space. When it enters the atmosphere and begins to burn up, we call it a meteor. And if it strikes planet Earth, we call it a meteorite. Basically, the meteor is what we call a shooting star. There are about 25 million meteoroids that approach or that enter the Earth's atmosphere each day. So a whole lot of these. Of course, a lot of them are very, very small, like pebble-like in size. How about a comet? Well, a comet is a cosmic snowball. Sometimes it's called a dirty snowball. Frozen, again, as we said before, when we say ice, we're referring to not only frozen water, but frozen ammonia and methane. So a comet is a frozen mass, also containing usually rock and dust, and it orbits around the sun. Now, a difference is that a meteoroid is, we call it that, when it approaches and tries and is pulled into planet Earth, either being burned up or hitting planet Earth. But a comet is something that continually orbits the sun, like the dwarf planets, you might think, and like the regular planets. If it were to strike planet Earth, we would refer to it as a meteoroid. But the comets can be much larger. They can be as large as a small town. And when they do approach the Earth, we can usually see them in terms of a tail that they produce, because they heat up as they get closer to planet Earth, and they spew out dust and clouds into this glowing comet with its comet tail. Now, comets have highly elliptical and eccentric orbits and have a wide range of periods. Until the 16th century, before we sort of had any clue of what these were, comets were usually considered bad omens, an omen of death of a king or a nobleman or a coming catastrophe, or even were interpreted as being attacked by heavenly beings against we terrestrial inhabitants of planet Earth. One of the most well-known comets is one called Halley's Comet, and it was thought to, for example, predict the death of King Harold Godwinson, the King of England, as they were fighting the French Normans in the Battle of Hastings, which the French Normans won, and that was the end of a particular line of the kings in England. And Halley's Comet was apparently viewable or seen during that period of time. And it was also at one time thought to be perhaps the Star of Bethlehem, although astronomers now believe that the Star of Bethlehem was caused by another comet or meteoroid. A little bit more about Halley's Comet. It is very regular in its appearance. We can see it from planet Earth every 75 years. And so those of you who are going to be around in 2061, 2062, you will hear about Halley's Comet. We know that it's distinctly different than the other planets and dwarf planets because it orbits the sun both in a very eccentric way, as you can see in the diagram below, where we have all the other planets going in a counterclockwise direction around the sun, more or less in a plane. Halley's Comet is going in the opposite direction. It's going in a clockwise orbit around the sun, and of course a very eccentric or elongated path around the sun. Halley's Comet is thought to have been in its current orbit for maybe more than 16,000 years, and it was first recorded maybe as long ago as 467 BC. And shown to the bottom right is a clay tablet, which it's believed to have documented an observation of Halley's Comet around 164 BC. Okay, so that's our chapter on Earth and the planets and some of the other bodies that we might have in our neighborhood, such as asteroids, meteoroids, and comets. And we'll stop now, and the next chapter will go more into geosciences, such things as plate tectonics. So see you then.